Amanda Johnson's life seemed to be a picture of perfection. Living in a beautiful, quiet neighborhood, she had the kind of family that others envied. Her husband, Tom, was a successful businessman, always dressed sharply and well-spoken. They had a charming daughter, Lily, who brought a sense of joy and innocence to their home. Together they hosted family gatherings, traveled to exotic locations, and always appeared to be the epitome of a happy family. Their friends admired them. Their social media was filled with glowing moments, and their life seemed as if it could not get any better. But as Amanda would soon realize, appearances can be deceiving. It was around the time when Lily started kindergarten that Amanda noticed a shift in Tom's behavior. At first it was subtle, a few extra late nights at work, a missed dinner, and the occasional distraction during family activities. She tried to ignore it, attributing it to the pressures of work. After all, Tom's business was growing, and with it came more responsibility. But as the weeks went by, the changes became harder to overlook. Tom's distance was more palpable, his mind often elsewhere, and the warmth in his gaze seemed to fade. One evening, after a particularly quiet dinner, Amanda decided to confront him. She sat down beside him on the couch, gently asking if something was wrong. Tom assured her everything was fine, but Amanda could sense the hesitation in his words. She pressed no further, not wanting to push him away. He had always been a private person, and perhaps he was simply stressed. She trusted him. Then, a few weeks later, Amanda stumbled upon something that made her heart race in her chest. While cleaning the house, she found an old phone hidden at the bottom of one of Tom's drawers. It wasn't a new phone, it was an older model, one she had never seen before. Instantly, a chill ran down her spine. She knew something was off. The phone was locked, but the curiosity that had been simmering in her for weeks took over. She waited for Tom to fall asleep, her fingers trembling as she unlocked the phone, desperate to uncover its secrets. What she found sent a wave of shock through her. The phone was filled with messages, texts, photos, and calls, all from a name she didn't recognize. At first, she assumed it was a colleague or someone from his business, but the nature of the texts, their flirtatious tone, and the frequency of their exchanges were unlike anything she had ever seen. The name on the screen was Lily's nanny, and Amanda immediately recognized her as the woman who had been hired to help care for their daughter when Amanda returned to work a few months prior. Tom had been having an affair. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She couldn't believe it. She had always trusted him, had always believed their marriage was strong. How could he betray her like this, with someone so close to their family? The shock was overwhelming, but Amanda was determined to find out the truth. The texts painted a picture of a secret, ongoing relationship, one that seemed to have been going on for months. Her heart raced as she read through the messages. Tom and the nanny had discussed their plans for the future, their desire to be together, and their plans to eventually break Amanda's heart. Every word felt like a knife in her chest. How could the man she loved, the father of her child, have been living a double life? Amanda's emotions were a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and betrayal. The life she thought she knew had just unraveled before her eyes. But even in the midst of this overwhelming realization, there was a quiet voice in the back of her mind, one that told her that this was just the beginning. There was more to this story than she could see. What had started as a simple discovery of an affair was about to lead her down a much darker path. Amanda's world had been shattered. The discovery of Tom's affair with Lily's nanny had left her reeling. She couldn't bring herself to confront him immediately, as a part of her was still in disbelief. How could this be true? How could the man she had loved and trusted for so long betray her in such a cruel, intimate way? But the evidence was undeniable. The phone, the texts, the lies, it was all too real. Tom had been living a double life, and Amanda had been none the wiser. In the days that followed, Amanda's mind raced with questions. She replayed every moment, every conversation, every interaction with Tom, trying to piece together how she had missed the signs. She thought back to the late nights, the unexplained absences, the sudden coldness between them. Had she been so blind, Or had Tom grown more adept at hiding his affair as time went on? Determined to understand the full extent of the situation, Amanda began investigating further. She dug through Tom's things, his emails, his private messages, even his bank statements. What she discovered only deepened her despair. It wasn't just a simple affair. Tom and his mistress, the nanny, had been plotting something far more sinister. The texts revealed that the affair had escalated quickly. What started as a physical relationship had turned into something darker, a shared plan to remove Amanda from the picture entirely. It became clear that Tom and the nanny had been discussing the possibility of killing Amanda for months, and they were getting closer to executing their plan. Amanda's shock turned to horror as she read the chilling exchanges between Tom and his lover. They had been talking about ways to make it look like an accident, to slip away from the life they had created together, and to start anew without Amanda. The more Amanda uncovered, the more it became apparent that Tom was not just trying to get rid of her emotionally, he wanted her dead. There were discussions about poisoning her, staging a car accident, and even a plan to make it seem like she had died of natural causes. The cruelty and precision with which they planned her demise sent a cold shiver down Amanda's spine. It was no longer just an affair. It was a conspiracy to end her life. As Amanda pieced together the details, the gravity of the situation became clear. Tom had gone to great lengths to hide his true intentions. He had convinced the nanny to become his accomplice, and together they had created a web of lies, manipulations, and deceptions. It was a cold, calculated plan that seemed to be moving forward with chilling efficiency. In a twisted way, Amanda couldn't help but admire the extent of their plotting. They had thought of everything from how to make her disappearance look like an accident to how they would dispose of evidence. They had even gone so far as to plan how they would cover up the affair once she was gone, ensuring no one would ever suspect them of being involved in her murder. But what disturbed Amanda the most was the complete lack of remorse. There was no indication that Tom had ever loved her in the way she had loved him. The texts between him and the nanny were filled with excitement about their future together, as if her death was just a minor obstacle to overcome. It became clear that Tom had been living a life of lies for months, if not years, and the woman he had once promised to love and protect was nothing more than an obstacle to his happiness. Amanda knew she couldn't wait any longer. She had to confront Tom, but she had to be smart about it. She couldn't risk him knowing she was onto him, not when he was this far gone. The only thing that mattered now was finding a way to protect herself and her daughter, Lily, from the man who had once been her whole world. She had to stay one step ahead, no matter the cost. Amanda knew that time was running out. The more she uncovered about Tom and his mistress's plot, the more desperate she became. She couldn't trust him anymore, not even for a moment. The man she had once called her partner, the father of her child, was planning to kill her with a cold precision that she could no longer ignore. Every fiber of her being screamed for action, but she knew she had to be careful. If she confronted him too early, she risked him going through with the plan before she had a chance to stop him. The weekend getaway Tom had promised her was approaching, a romantic trip to the mountains he had suggested to reconnect with her. The timing couldn't have been worse. Amanda now realized that this was no romantic escape, it was the final piece of his plan. He had chosen the mountains because it would be remote, isolated, a perfect place to make her disappearance seem like an accident. He would get rid of her, and no one would question it. The thought made Amanda's blood run cold. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became that she couldn't trust Tom for even a second. She had to prepare herself, both mentally and physically, for whatever might happen. She couldn't let her guard down. Amanda spent the next few days doing everything she could to prepare, taking small but vital steps to protect herself. She started by contacting a lawyer, although she didn't plan on telling him everything just yet. She knew that in the coming days, her life would change irrevocably, and she needed to have a plan in place. She also made sure to record everything, any conversation that could be relevant, any clue that might tie Tom to the plot. Her phone became her lifeline, capturing messages, screenshots, and even videos of the things she had found. She then began to suspect that Tom might try to control the narrative during their getaway. He had to make sure that everything seemed normal, that Amanda didn't suspect anything. Amanda knew she couldn't trust him to tell the truth, not anymore. She decided to tell a close friend about the trip, leaving behind specific details, including the location of the getaway, just in case. If something went wrong, someone would know where to look for her. On the day of the trip, Amanda did her best to act natural, even though every part of her felt like it was screaming in panic. Tom, oblivious to her suspicions, was in high spirits, eager to head off to the mountains. He was eager to make the trip appear like an innocent vacation, and Amanda played along, putting on a facade of calm, although her mind was racing. She packed her bags as though everything were fine, but secretly she was preparing for the worst. As they drove toward their destination, Amanda watched Tom carefully. He was calm, almost too calm. It made her sick to think that she was about to spend an entire weekend with a man who was planning her murder. He would look at her with those same eyes she had once trusted and pretend nothing was wrong. His charm was still intact, but Amanda could feel the weight of the betrayal growing heavier with every passing mile. Her heart pounded in her chest as they drew closer to the mountains, and the familiar landmarks faded away, leaving them in more isolated terrain. It was then, as they reached the base of the mountain road, that Amanda's instincts flared. Something didn't feel right. The car ride had been quiet, but there was an eerie tension between them. She kept scanning their surroundings, looking for any sign that something was out of the ordinary. The only thing she could rely on now was her gut feeling, which told her that Tom had every intention of following through on his dark plan. But there was a glimmer of hope. She had not come this far without a plan of her own. She knew that even if she couldn't stop Tom outright, she could do everything in her power to survive. She couldn't let her guard down. This weekend was going to be a fight for her life, and she wasn't going to let him get away with it. As Amanda and Tom made their way deeper into the mountains, the heavy silence between them was almost suffocating. The air outside had turned colder, and the trees seemed to close in around them, creating a sense of isolation that Amanda couldn't shake. Every turn of the winding road felt like they were getting further and further from the life she had known, and the suffocating tension in the car mirrored the terror building inside her. She glanced at Tom, who was driving with an unsettling calm, his eyes fixed ahead as if nothing were wrong. It was as though the plan had already been set in motion, and Amanda was just another obstacle he needed to manage. She kept reminding herself to stay composed, to keep up the act. She couldn't let him suspect that she had figured it all out. She had to wait for the right moment to strike, to find a way to escape or signal for help before it was too late. The evening air was growing colder, and as the sun began to set, they arrived at the cabin Tom had rented for their supposed getaway. It was isolated, perched on the edge of a cliff, offering stunning views of the valley below. But to Amanda it felt like a prison, a place where she might never leave alive. Tom carried their bags inside, smiling as though this were just another weekend away. His demeanor was the same as it had always been, but Amanda now saw him through a different lens. He was not the man she had married. He was a stranger, someone who could easily turn their love into something deadly. Inside, the cabin was rustic but beautiful, the large windows allowing the last rays of sunlight to pour in, casting long shadows across the room. Amanda's eyes scanned the surroundings. She noticed the firewood stacked in the corner, the small kitchen off to one side, and the wooden beams above them. It felt too quiet, too perfect. They had dinner together, a meal that Tom had prepared with care, but Amanda couldn't bring herself to eat much. Every bite felt like it might be her last. The thought of what might happen once the night fell weighed heavily on her, and she could hardly focus on anything other than the sinister plan unfolding. Tom, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to her unease. He smiled as he poured them both wine, and for a fleeting moment Amanda almost believed that this was just another night. But deep down, she knew better. Later, as the evening wore on, Amanda excused herself to go to the bathroom. She knew it was now or never. As soon as the door clicked shut behind her, She grabbed her phone and quickly typed out a message to her best friend, sending the details of the trip, the cabin's location, the fact that they were staying overnight, and her fear that something was wrong. She hit send, hoping against hope that it would reach her friend in time. She had no idea if anyone would act on it, but it was her only chance. When she returned to the living room, Tom was waiting with a glass of wine in hand, a look of quiet expectation on his face. He was still playing the part of the loving husband, the man who just wanted to rekindle their marriage. But Amanda could see the glint of something darker behind his eyes. The night had fallen completely now, and the cabin seemed even more isolated, the shadows stretching across the walls like dark memories. Amanda had to keep moving to stay one step ahead of him. As they sat together, Tom suggested they go for a walk outside. The chill in the air didn't bother him. He was eager to take advantage of the isolation, perhaps to set his plan into motion. Amanda knew this was it, she had to act. But how? How could she escape this? How could she survive when everything was stacked against her? As they stepped out into the crisp night air, Amanda's mind raced. Her body was screaming for her to run. But she knew better. She couldn't take off and leave Lily behind. She couldn't leave without a plan. Every nerve in her body screamed for action, but she had to be smart. She had to find a way to survive and make it back home to her daughter. And then, just as they reached the edge of the cabin's porch, Amanda's phone buzzed. A single message, "I'm coming." Her heart skipped a beat. Someone had received her message and help might be on the way, but it was still too risky. Her next move had to be perfect. The game wasn't over yet. The cold night air bit at Amanda's skin as she stood at the edge of the porch, pretending to enjoy the view. The message from her friend, "I'm coming," was a flicker of hope, but it was still too early to celebrate. The plan was not yet in motion, and she couldn't afford to make a misstep. Tom, standing beside her, seemed entirely unaware of the internal turmoil raging within her. He spoke casually about the scenery, about how the quiet of the mountains reminded him of their earlier years together. But Amanda couldn't hear his words. Her mind was too focused on one question: how could she turn this situation to her advantage? Her eyes darted across the cabin, looking for any possible escape routes, any opportunity to send a signal without alerting Tom. She knew she couldn't run not without a plan, and she couldn't risk antagonizing him. For now, she had to keep him calm, keep him believing that everything was normal. If she did anything to provoke him, she knew he would make his move. And once that happened, it would be too late. The quiet tension between them was unbearable. Tom took her hand, leading her toward the wooded path behind the cabin. "It's beautiful out here," he said, his voice almost too smooth, too controlled. Amanda's heart raced, but she forced a smile, nodding as if everything was fine. They walked for a few minutes, the crunch of their footsteps the only sound breaking the silence. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting eerie shadows on the ground. It was the perfect setting for what he had planned. As they walked deeper into the woods, Amanda's mind raced. She had to act fast. If she didn't, she knew Tom would carry out his twisted plan, and she would never see her daughter again. She had no idea how much time she had left, but she wasn't going to let her fear control her. She had already made a promise to herself that she would survive. She couldn't afford to let Tom or his accomplice have the last word. Just as they reached a small clearing, Amanda's phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a new message. "I'm almost there." The message was short, but it gave her hope. Someone was on their way to help, and that was all she needed to know. She had to stay alive for a little while longer. The odds were shifting in her favor, but only if she could keep up the charade just a bit longer. She paused, pretending to admire the view, as Tom moved to stand beside her. His presence was oppressive, and Amanda could feel his eyes on her, scanning her face for any hint of suspicion. She needed a distraction, something that would keep him occupied long enough for her to make her move. Her mind was running through possibilities, each one more desperate than the last. Then it hit her. She could use the phone. She had already texted her friend, but she still had one more card to play. Acting as casually as possible, Amanda asked Tom if he wanted to take a photo of the view. It was an innocuous request, something so simple that he would be likely to agree. When he took the phone from her, she pretended to fumble with it for a moment, then pressed the emergency button, sending a distress signal. It wasn't much, but it was enough to alert authorities to her location. Tom didn't notice the subtle press of the button, too caught up in adjusting the camera settings. As he focused on getting the perfect shot, Amanda took a deep breath, silently thanking whatever force had guided her in that moment. It wasn't a foolproof plan, but it was a step in the right direction. As they finished their brief walk and headed back to the cabin, Amanda's mind was a whirlwind of possibilities. She still had no idea when help would arrive, or if it would arrive in time. But now, at least she had a chance. The message had been sent, and she knew that she wasn't alone in this fight. Back inside the cabin, Tom seemed oblivious to the fact that everything had shifted. He continued to act as if nothing were wrong, but Amanda could see the strain in his eyes. She knew that he was trying to keep up the act, but she could feel the tension in his body. He was getting nervous, and that worked in her favor. He was starting to realize that the perfect plan he had carefully crafted was beginning to unravel, but it wasn't over yet. Amanda stayed calm, knowing that she had to keep her wits about her for just a little while longer. She would survive this. She had to. For herself, for Lily, and for everything she had ever loved.